First of all, so grateful you're all here. Welcome to Alignment. I am Margaret Somerville, and a special welcome to those who are joining Alignment for the first time tonight. It is my great honor to welcome John Philip Newell and to have you join us for this precious time together. Many of us here have read and reread and been transformed by your writings. I'll never forget at the beginning of my own seminary career when a professor said, find someone's work that guides your way of thinking and let this follow you on your journey through seminary. And for me, that was listening for the heartbeat of God and the rebirthing of God among many others. I think I've got them all. But each one was connecting me more deeply to listening to how the divine is revealed in my life and to my connection to the sacredness of all life. I was asking someone last week in our session that after reading your newest work, Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul, did they see how your work is woven into the intention of what alignment is and really lives in its roots? Our intention is the seeking of peace through connection to the divine that we find revealed within us and beside us and beyond us. And this really has been guided foundationally by what you have offered in your work. So before we have some more specific questions, and I know there will be some people putting some thoughts in the chat as we go along, could we begin by you just highlighting for us a small part of your journey to recognizing the sacredness of all that is?
Yes, thank you, Margaret, and very good to be with you all tonight. Thank you for the welcome. I remember as a young university student in Edinburgh hearing George MacLeod speak publicly for the first time. So I was in my early 20s, and I think he was maybe in his early 80s. And it was the first time in my life that I had heard a Christian teacher articulating a sense of the sacredness of earth and the sacredness of every human being. And part of that vision for George MacLeod was, of course, the sacredness of every human being. It should lead us to the way of nonviolence. So it was really the first time I had heard a Christian teacher articulate sacredness of earth and the way of nonviolence as the way of true relationship and interrelationship. And I remember feeling as I heard him that I was coming home in some way, even though if I had been asked before I heard him, you know, what is the home address of your soul, I'm not sure that I would have been able to delineate it very well. But such was the impact of George MacLeod, the founder of the modern day Iona community, on me. And he drew very heavily from Celtic wisdom before him. Such was the impact that I felt I need somehow to come close to this man. And I didn't know how I was going to do that. But a couple of months later, I was on Iona, and I was there with my wife, and we were walking along the Sound of Iona pathway, and bumped into the great man. And George MacLeod was a tremendous character and great passion for earth and for the way of nonviolence. And if you were to meet George MacLeod on the high street of Edinburgh or on a quiet pathway of Iona, you would tend not to get hello, how are you today, or fine day. You would tend to get something like, do you believe in nonviolence? These were his opening words. And I mean, he sort of asked it so assertively that you felt terrified to disagree with him. He was maybe the most aggressive pacifist the modern world has known. But he greeted, he entered into conversation very warmly, and what I didn't yet know about him, something that I came to know and admire, is that he had a great capacity to draw, especially young men, close to him. I mean, he was a sort of Edwardian gentleman. He had some of the limitations of the Edwardian age about him, so he didn't really know how to allow young women to draw close to him. He was very gentlemanly, and with Ali, my wife, he would always ask how the family was and so on. But he didn't quite know how to bring young women close to him. But he was very gifted at bringing young men close. And that meeting and that conversation really changed the course of my life. And we spent some time on that day in the house that he was staying on Iona, and I will always remember the question that he asked me at the end of the conversation when we were speaking about care for the earth themes and just unilateral nuclear disarmament themes. And I remember him saying, "Newell, what are we going to do about all this?" And the older I become, the more struck I am by that question. He could have so easily said, "Young man, let me tell you what we're to do." I mean, he was a man of enormous experience and enormous wisdom. But part of his gift of leadership was to say, "What are we going to do about it?" And the other sort of word in the question that was so important was not just what are we going to think about these things, what are we going to believe about these things. It was what are we going to do? What are we going to write? What are we going to say? What are we going to act in order to bring about change? So that was a really formative moment in my life, and I looking back on it, it becomes more important as I sort of see what my sort of span of commitment and passion and focus has been over the decades.
Thank you. I can just, he had a way of addressing, as you saying, bringing the young men into his fold, of addressing them all by the last name. I can hear him saying Newell to you, as
right.
as he would say Somerville to my dad.
Yeah.
And he, as well as drawing those people he saw as new leaders in, he had a way with young children as well. I remember when I must have been under 10, and him taking me, pulling me with great eagerness over to a bit in the cloisters in the Abbey and saying, "Margaret, look at that stone." And pointing this stone, I can still find it today. He said, "Your dad put that stone in the Abbey when they were rebuilding it." He said, "Do you know how I know your dad put that one in? It's crooked." And he just had such a humor about him that just,
yes,
he loved drawing people in that. And that is another way in which he saw this sacredness in all beings.
that's right.
But yeah, to meet with him is a transformational experience in itself.
Yeah. Yes, that sort of playful side of George MacLeod is important. When I think of some of the great spiritual leaders of humanity in our time, when you think of someone like Desmond Tutu in the Christian tradition or the Dalai Lama in Buddhism, these are individuals who have known suffering, they've witnessed suffering, they've known terrible struggle among their people. So these aren't people who are naive to the struggle and to the pain and the suffering. And at the same time, they're people of tremendous joy and often laughter. and that was true of George MacLeod as well. That yes, he was passionately calling the church and the world to change, but he often had us laughing, and I think those twin dimensions to who he is, we see in other great leaders.
Where would he say we are today, 50 years from when he first made the call for that week of prayer for world peace that we've just celebrated? What would he have to say to us today?
Well, I think that that he would be saying a number of things. I think one is that he would be quite radically affirming the extent to which Earth consciousness is now with us. Again, not in a naive way. We have so much work still to do, but he prophetically anticipated the Earth awareness that we're in the midst of. As early as the 1940s, he was calling for organic farming and the need to come back into true relationship with Earth. I think he would of course be deeply upset by the continued lack of peace in different parts of the world, and the tragedy of what vengeance shows itself to do, eye for an eye, multiplying, intensifying the conflict. But I think he would also be wanting to affirm the depth of engagement and prayer and concern and realization that violence is not the way forward. This may not be the stance that our political leadership is taking, but I think increasing numbers of people on the ground are saying this is madness, and we see the madness of what violence does in the Middle East.
Thank you. I feel so grateful that you're here at this special time of year, one of these liminal spaces recognized in the Celtic tradition, Samhain, the threshold space between seasons, between the here and there and the now and then. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about Bridget, if you would, this wonderful chapter about Bridget born at the threshold of her house, at the threshold of the day, to a Christian mother and a Druid father, and really bridging traditions and time spans and her connection to the goddess Bridget. I see her as an icon for interfaith engagement, and would love for you to talk to us a little bit about recognizing the importance of liminal spaces in our experience.
Yeah, I think that someone like Bridget is rising in our consciousness now, precisely because we need her presence and the inspiration of how she lived in relation to the liminal, and the meeting place between so-called opposites. I mean, part of the sort of tragedy of fragmentation and separation in our world is the sort of absolutizing of opposites instead of looking for where the so-called opposite can meet, can embrace. And one of the images that I use in Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul in the chapter on Bridget is that she's really standing in the archway, in the meeting place, so the doorway between the pre-Christian and the Christian, and my research into Bridget led me to believe that she was not simply a Druid before her seeing Christ as her Druid, coming to see Christ as her Druid, and therefore bringing a deep meeting and embracing between Druidic wisdom and Christ wisdom. It seems that she was the leader of the most significant Druidic community in Ireland, in Leinster. And one of the strands of legend also links her with the Druidic community on Iona. And I love to remember that Iona was a Druid holy island, and that Columba, the great saint of the 6th century saint of Iona, called Christ his Druid, and it was to see the richness of meeting in the doorway, sort of embracing between faith traditions, and instead of seeing them in isolation or forgetting that just as the physical world needs biodiversity, so the spiritual world needs diversity. Our diversity is for one another, and not it shouldn't be seen as somehow over against the other. And so certainly on the Druid and Christian front, she's this liminal figure, this threshold figure, but also she's very much a threshold figure between earth and humanity, and also is very identified with what's trying to be born. So in that sense, the threshold, or the doorway, or the meeting place between what is in the womb of the universe, waiting to come forth, yearning to manifest within us and among us in new ways, and what's in the womb and what's trying to be born, what's trying to come forth. And in all of these areas, she's there, sort of ready to move to the meeting place, the intersection place, instead of in isolation. And I think this is, in that sense, she is embodying, or is an icon of something that I think is absolutely essential for this moment in time. I mean, if we don't approach that threshold place of relationship with Earth, we increasingly know that humanity is going to miss out on Earth's continuing unfolding, and Earth is going to heal. The question is whether humanity gets to be part of that. And the same is true in other areas. I think we're more and more seeing that religious traditions who cut themselves off from the wisdom of other traditions, they have no future. There's no because what they're living is a denial of the interrelatedness of the universe and of all people and all traditions.
And I deeply hope that is, in some very small way, what we are doing here at Alignment each week. We are meeting at a threshold. We are meeting someone from a tradition that may feel very unfamiliar to our own. But I love this line that you say, that God can be found in the bringing together of opposites. This is where what has never been before comes into being. I hold on to that, because I hope that in this space that we create in Alignment, we are creating that space, that threshold space, that liminal space where opposites might come together. We never want to think, as many people question, that interfaith work means, oh, we're looking for the sameness in all traditions. We're looking for that one, the way we are all one. But really upholding that, no, we're coming into this threshold space where opposites can meet,
Mhm.
And in that space, God is found in the bringing together of opposites. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and that's the Carl Jung would say that of course the greatest opposite conjunction of opposites is the masculine and feminine, and what happens when the masculine and the feminine sort of conjoin is pregnancy. So something new happens, something that has not been before comes out of that conjoining of opposites, and I think that's what someone like Bridget is bearing witness to.
Yeah, such a beautiful figure she is. Larry
Yeah.
saying in the chat here, will you please help me better understand the Christ all around us that is not the human form of Christ, rather than God all around us? I have difficulty thinking of Christ other than in human form.
Mm-hmm.
Question.
Well, in that we've been speaking about George MacLeod, is George that comes to mind in response to that query. One of the words that George uses is to speak about the Christic, Christic, and by speaking of the Christic, I think what he was always pointing to was the intersection of the divine and the human, of spirit and matter, of heaven and earth, deep within us. So by the Christic, he's not just pointing to Jesus, but seeing Jesus as one who manifests this intersection of the divine and the human, heaven and earth, spirit and matter in all things. And in part, when he speaks of the Christic or speaks of our Christhood, he's doing something very similar to what our Buddhist brothers and sisters do when they speak of our Buddha nature. So they're speaking, pointing to that interweaving of divine and human within us. So I think that's what someone like George is meaning when he speaks of the Christic, and that for me is right at the heart of my own sort of devotion to the wisdom of the Christian tradition that I stand in. But I think that a critical issue for the future of Christianity today is, will we follow our love of the light that we see in Jesus? Will we follow that into looking for that light, adoring it, cherishing it, nurturing it, protecting it, deep within every human being and deep within the whole body of earth? Or will we continue to give the impression that this light that we love in Jesus is somehow essentially an exception to humanity, an exception to earth, rather than manifestation or revelation of what is at the heart of all life?
Yeah, and you see Molly commenting here, this is very much a Quaker idea as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm fascinated by the resonances between Quaker wisdom and Celtic wisdom, and of course both these traditions have a love and a conviction of the light that enlightens every person, and the light that is at the heart of all life. And in that sense, these traditions are starting from a very similar position in affirming that the light of the divine is to be encountered at the heart of all life.
And that reminds me of one of my favorite lines that kind of such a simple shift in way of thinking, to say we are made of God rather than simply we're made by God.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It has big implications, doesn't it? And yeah, and that is Julian of Norwich that speaks of us being made of God rather than by God, and I think that that's one of the reasons why Julian so loves to refer to God as mother, as well as father, because she sees us as coming out of the very womb or coming out of the very essence of the divine. And we find something very similar in the Celtic world, and as early as the 2nd century, Irenaeus of Lyon, in the sort of Celtic context of ancient Gaul, is saying that we and all things, and the body of earth, the cosmos, everything has come out of the substance of God. This is a word that still shocks our dualistic Western ears. Because to say that everything comes out of the substance of God, or that we're all made of God, is to say that the stuff of the human body is sacred, and how we handle one another in relationship is a sacred issue, and how we care for the most physical needs of those who are hungry and homeless and seeking shelter and sanctuary in our nation. These are sacred matters, and how we handle the matter of the body of earth with reverence, but also with a desire for equity and justice. These are sacred matters. So these have enormous, absolutely enormous implications if we actually take on board that we are made of the divine, or that we are made of the substance of the divine.
Yes, and the understanding that once we come to that understanding of earth and every human being as sacred, that can be applied to every pressing issue of humanity on the earth today. Every issue, understanding that.
Yeah.
May I bring up this other quote about well-being, because this really touched me, according to what this group of alignment is here too. You say in Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul, the path to well-being is not about becoming something other than ourselves, or about acquiring a spiritual knowledge that is essentially foreign to us. It's about waking up to a knowledge that is deep in the very fabric of our being. It's about living in relation to this wisdom. So as we all step out of this space where we get to be together here, an essential step for us all as we face this week ahead is recognizing this. And any word as to anyone who is having trouble recognizing that in themselves, would you have a word?
Yeah, for me, it is again and again remembering that we don't have to somehow achieve the divine. We don't have to somehow invoke the divine, or somehow manufacture the presence of the divine. It's about liberating what is already deep within us and deep within one another. And it's about the vision and the confidence and the faith to see ourselves as liberators, of knowing that the wisdom of the divine, the creativity of the divine, the love longings of the divine, are deep within us, but they're also at the heart of every other human being, including those we disagree with. So in encounter with disagreement, our line should never be that we're trying to make the other like us or like ourselves. We're striving to enable the other to be truly themselves, made of God. That is often coupled with the prophetic work of denouncing what is false, or naming what is unjust. Of course, we do that. But so many great movements for change and for for transformation end up undermining themselves, because we end up in a slippery path of self-righteousness, in which we're saying, you need to change and become like me, or you need to change and become like us, or our religion, or our nation. And I think one of the things that is very liberating to remember that we are all made of God is to know that the essence is there, the essence of beauty and wisdom and love has been deeply planted or fashioned in us in our mother's womb, as the wisdom literature of Hebrew scripture says.
I believe that if all of your work is put into a few words, when your time comes, as George MacLeod's All Matter Matters, for me it will be, we are all made of God. Or perhaps there is no distinction between love and justice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm wondering if I could just conclude our time here with one of your prayers, a prayer of blessing. May the love of life fill our hearts. May the love of earth bring joy to heaven. May the love of self deepen our souls. May the love of neighbor heal our world. As nations, as peoples, as families this day, may the love of life heal our world. I am so deeply grateful that you have joined us for this precious time. It's hard to let you go, but great gratitude from all of us to you for the way you make us see the sacredness of all beings and of this sacred earth.
Thank you, Margaret, and blessings to you all.
Peace to you all. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.